Good evening. My name is Dhiravamso Bhikkhu. I'm an English monk. I live in Sri Lanka at the moment, 5 years. I ordained in England at Amaravati Monastery, which is Ajahn Sumedho, is an American monk. He was my preceptor. So I ordained 20 years ago. And Ajahn Sumedho was from the Thai tradition, Thai forest tradition. So his teacher was a monk called Ajahn Chah, who was a very famous teacher in Thailand. And Ajahn Sumedho was the first Western disciple he had. So Ajahn Sumedho now himself has retired. So I lived in various monasteries over the last 20 years, and for the last 6 years I've been living here in Sri Lanka. I live in a kuti in the forest near Balangoda. So what I wanted to talk about, obviously talk about Buddhism and about meditation. I wanted to give a little bit of advice on meditation and encourage you to meditate, because many people don't, and even confirmed Buddhists don't meditate. So I was talking this morning with, I think, Kushi, is that your name? I keep forgetting the name. And about how it can be a bit off-putting. And after we spoke, another woman came, and when I mentioned the talk, but her question, she said, "But is it useful though?" So I thought this would be the kind of the theme of the talk. Is it actually useful? Is there any actual practical benefit of meditating? Or for that matter, Buddhism. Is Buddhism useful? And so the short answer is yes. Slightly longer answer is very definitely so. So how meditation fits into the Buddhist teaching, the Buddhist path. Just a second, is it possible to turn that, to somehow get rid of some of that wine? Because I find it distracting, probably the listeners will too. Maybe we'll just have to put up with this. So one of the things in meditation, actually, and in life in general, some things you have to learn to endure. So like the feedback wine we'll have to put up with. So when I first became a Buddhist, about 25 years ago or something, I heard about the basic Buddhist teachings, and then I read a book by a Sri Lankan monk, Walpola Rahula. I don't know if he's well known in this country, but he wrote a book in English, What the Buddha Taught. It's a very good book for kind of secular Western types, because it presents Buddhism and Theravada Buddhism, but without any of the more fanciful, what many Westerners would consider like superstitious or aspects of Buddhism. So just the practical, it presents Buddhism as a sort of psychology, really. So I read this book, and although I think Walpola Rahula himself probably wasn't a meditator himself, he was a scholar monk, but he has a chapter on bhavana. And bhavana, the word means development, really, and it's translated as meditation in English. And generally it means any kind of mental development. So he has a chapter extolling the virtues of meditation and how it's necessary for the path. So I thought, yeah, that's very good. And it was all part of the thing that inspired me about Buddhism. But it was a long time before I actually forced myself to go and sit down and meditate and sit myself on a cushion and do it. It's much easier to just read about it and about how useful it is, and to the wonderful teachings of the Buddha, and be very inspired. But to actually sit and meditate, I suspected, and I was right, I suspected it would be very difficult, because meditation is, even for people who live very much in our minds, and intelligent people who are educated, we place a lot of importance on the mind, and of course Buddhism places a lot of importance on the mind, more so than any other religion at all. But even so, what we do with our minds, studying, learning, entertaining ourselves, is a very different thing from meditation. Meditation is a completely different skill. And I kind of suspected that this isn't going to be, although I was very good academically, I suspected that this isn't necessarily something I'm going to be good at. if I try to learn to meditate, it's completely different. And I was right, it is altogether. So it's a bit off-putting. So, and the other difficult thing about meditation is that it's not just difficult. It's not that it is difficult to do, but it's different. It's a different kind of skill. It's a different thing to do with our minds from what we're used to doing. But the other thing about it is it's not terribly easy to learn it, to teach other people how to meditate, because it's very much internal. So you can't check if somebody's doing it right. You can't kind of sit next to somebody, watch them meditating, going, oh, no, you're doing a bit wrong. We can't see into each other's minds. And the Buddha had the ability to know what people were doing and doing right and wrong. So the Buddha would have been a wonderful teacher to have. Unfortunately, the Buddha isn't around anymore. So we have to rely on the texts, the Buddhist instructions the Buddha left, and also on teachers, contemporary teachers. But even so, contemporary teachers, they can only help us so much. So it is a difficult thing, and it's an off-putting thing. And many people, I hear this again and again and again. People say, well, I've got a very busy life. I'm very busy. I've got many things to do. And so finding time to meditate is something people find. It's like, I've got so many other things I've got to do. But I wanted to, is known as samatha meditation. So it's calming the mind. And in many ways, that can be seen as simply, the Buddha talked about these obstacles in the mind called the hindrances. So you may have heard of the 5 hindrances, or you may not have heard of them. And in Pali, it's nivarana. So the 5 hindrances, in English, they're usually called the 5 hindrances. And samatha meditation can be seen basically as overcoming the hindrances. But the hindrances, they're not just things about meditation. The Buddha called the nirvanas, how do they put it? They're something like defilements of the mind which weaken wisdom. And I can't remember the exact phrase actually. They weaken wisdom and weaken the mind basically. So they obstruct the mind. They're obstacles to wisdom. I can't remember the exact phrase. I should have looked it up before I came. But the thing about the hindrances is they're not just obstacles to becoming wise and obstacles to becoming calm in meditation, but they're obstacles to anything you do with your mind. So there's one interesting sutta where a Brahmin priest comes to the Buddha and says, how is it that sometimes, and the Brahmins, basically what they do, their stock in trade was chanting, doing like Pirit basically, but the Vedas, chanting the Vedas. So they had to memorize lots of Vedic chants, and none of it was ever written down. So all had to be in their minds. And this Brahmin said, how is it that sometimes when I try to learn the chant, remember the chanting, I can't remember even stuff I practiced yesterday, never mind stuff I practiced years ago. Even the things I chanted yesterday, it doesn't come to my mind. Other times, I'm practicing, and I can remember stuff that was chanted years ago, never mind what I learned yesterday. Why is this? And the Buddha said, it's because the 5 hindrances are present. On the occasions when you can't remember, because the 5 hindrances are strong. And on the occasions when you can, it's because the 5 hindrances are weak. So to go through, just to mention, in case you don't know what they are, the hindrances are kamachanda is like desire, sensual desire, so desire for things, attraction. Then aversion is the next one. Restlessness of the mind. Sloth and torpor is the usual translation. They're rather old-fashioned words. So dullness, basically, dullness of the mind is the 4th. And the last one is doubt. So these are the 5 hindrances. So desire, so the first 4 are kind of in pairs. Desire, aversion, restlessness, dullness, and doubt. And the Buddha talks a lot about these in the context of meditation. And they're usually taught in the context of learning to meditate. But actually, it's not just about meditation. So as the Buddha said to this Brahmin, and as he's said many other times, they're not just things which make it hard to meditate. These are things which make it hard for the mind, for the brain, if you like, to function at all. So you probably all experience times when, there are times when if we're trying to do some task, trying to write or read or do something, the times we can't really function very well. And often we know this as well because I'm tired, I didn't get much sleep last night, or I've been very busy, and so it's kind of clear that why, it's just, well, because I'm tired. But other times, you're not particularly tired, and it's not really clear why, but you find it's just, yeah, I'm feeling really stupid today. Nothing seems to sink in, it's taking me ages I can't think straight. And there are other times still when the mind seems really sharp and bright, and there's no clear reason why. Well, effectively, the Buddha says the difference is the hindrances. When the hindrances are strong, then your mind is dull. And when the hindrances are weak, then your mind is bright and alert. As well as the hindrances, there is simple physical tiredness. And the vicikiccha, the tinamida, the one translated as dullness or sloth and torpor, it's not the same as physical tiredness, but they feel very much the same. So physical tiredness is, if you haven't had enough sleep, you will be tired. Though it is possible to overcome that with the mind. But the dullness of the mind, it feels like tiredness, but it isn't actually. It's a dullness in the mind. But it feels very similar. So learning to meditate is about overcoming the hindrances. As we meditate, we do overcome the hindrances. But it has usefulness not just in our meditation, not just so we can get peaceful and calm and have a nice time for an hour or half an hour each time we meditate. It actually improves the whole functioning of our minds. And I can only speak from personal experience, but I remember having a conversation with a monk a few years ago saying that nowadays, if I don't meditate for a while, I find I'm not functioning properly. I get irritable very easily, much more easily. I get distracted more easily. I'm just less efficient, if you like. And it makes me wonder how I ever managed for 30 years before I learned to meditate. How did I get by? Because now I feel it's almost like I'm mentally ill. If I don't meditate for a long period, it's like my mind starts degenerating into kind of mush. So it's like, how did I manage for 30 years? And I can only imagine that I just managed at a much worse level, basically. So the Buddha also, on another occasion, said that many people can be healthy, physically healthy, for many years. Sometimes for years or even decades at a time, be physically healthy. But nobody has perfect mental health for even 5 minutes, apart from the arahants, apart from enlightened people. If you're not an arahant, then basically you're mentally ill, basically. So we're all mentally ill. But you might have physical health, but you don't really have proper mental health because you have the defilements in your mind. So just as we all, well, most of us try to look after our health, even doctors I know don't necessarily look after their health very well, but meditating is like looking after your mental health. So if you're not doing it, really it's like somebody who doesn't really look after themselves properly. But because hardly anyone meditates, generally, people on the planet as a whole, very few people meditate proportionally, it's not seen as something that's really essential, whereas nowadays it's seen, if you don't look after your body, if you're unfit, especially if you get into your middle age and you don't look after yourself, then everybody knows, well, you're heading for problems later on, really. You need to look after your health, or you're going to die young or have terrible chronic health problems when you're later on. But because meditation is not such a common thing, lots of people exercise and go jogging and running and go to the gym, but not so many people meditate. So it's not seen as like a deficiency in your lifestyle that you don't meditate. Meditation is seen as like an option that you might want to do, and many people like to do it, but it's not seen as something that really, if you want to look after yourself, you should be meditating. You get leaflets from the government and stuff, and posters in England all the time saying, you should be doing it, you should be exercising, you should be watching your salt intake and this and that. But nobody says, well, you should be meditating, really. Why aren't you meditating? But if we really had a proper view of our lives, meditation really should be part of your life. Because if you're not meditating, you're not looking after your mind. And if your mind is important to you, then you really should be looking after it. So we hear, especially nowadays, a lot about how people have learned how to mitigate against the problems of, say, Alzheimer's and other dementia that if you keep your mind active, if you keep on learning and so on and so forth, there's various things you can do to make it less likely you'll get Alzheimer's as you're older. So that's seen as like, okay, yes, looking after your mind. So looking after your mind means keeping active, having many interests and studying. But that's only one aspect of looking after your mind. There's looking after your just general mental health in a slightly different sense from the accepted view of it. And to do that means meditating, basically. So there are now a growing awareness of certain aspects of what is traditionally called meditation and how that has mental health benefits. So I don't know if it's the case here, but in England, certainly, and in America, mindfulness has become a huge movement, mindfulness movement in England. It's almost like a kind of fad, but it has like evidence behind it. So I was kind of surprised when about 10 years ago, a friend of mine who was doing an occupational therapy degree, as part of her degree, she did a course on mindfulness. And it comes from, they mean mindfulness as in sati. So it's a slightly different emphasis with the way they teach it, but effectively it's sati from Buddhism. And now, when I went back to England 3 years ago, I was amazed that everywhere. I was sitting next to some people in the park, and I could hear them talking. I kept on hearing the word Buddhism and stuff. I thought they were talking about me. They weren't talking about me at all. They didn't even look in my direction. They were talking about mindfulness. They had a little book. I asked them, "Can I have a look at your book?" I had a little book, a little kind of glossy, kind of colourful bit, where the kind of little books you get, where it's got one little nice quote on each page, and the whole book cost 10 quid, and you've got, they could have fit it into a small pamphlet, but they make more money by selling a glossy book with nice quotes, all about mindfulness, and had a few references in the back to Buddhist texts. And in a park, there was yoga classes, and there was child minding classes advertised on the board, and there was 2 different notices about mindfulness classes. So it's very, very big. It's very in popular culture. And on the NHS, the National Health Service, you can get mindfulness classes for pain relief and for depression specifically, and perhaps for other things. I'm not quite sure. So it's become acknowledged, basically. There've been scientific studies now that show that actually, yes, this thing, mindfulness, is a very, very practical, measurable benefit. So it's kind of joined the ranks of those things which are considered to be looking after your mental health. Of course, the Buddha was the only teacher in antiquity to realize the value of mindfulness, because it seems like such a strange thing. And I remember talking about it to friends when I became a Buddhist years ago, and trying to get across the purpose of this. And they were mystified, some of them. It's just like, I can't see that. Just paying attention to what you're doing. So I was talking to a friend about walking down the road. As we go about our daily business, so you might be driving to work or on the road. We tend to think about stuff other than the fact that we're walking down the road. If you're walking down the street, you're not thinking about the fact you're walking down the street. It's a kind of boring thing to put your mind on. But we tend to think about where we're going, what we're going to do when we get there, the conversation we just had at the place we left, things like this. But mindfulness means being in the present moment. So if you're walking, if you have mindfulness, then you're aware of the body walking. And I remember one friend in particular said, "That's ridiculous, it's so boring. I've got better things to do with my mind than just pay attention to the fact I'm walking down the street." And it was very difficult sometimes to convince people it's actually a useful thing to do. And it's part of the genius of the Buddha to take such a seemingly mundane aspect of the mind and say, no, this is very important. Mindfulness is very, very important. So it's one of the factors of the Eightfold Path is samma sati, right mindfulness. And it's one of the 7 enlightenment factors. There's many lists that the Buddha talks about, different teachings he gives, and sati occurs again and again and again. And when he talks about, for instance, the enlightenment factors, he says about the different ones, that there are times when samadhi, which is what we're trying to do when we practice meditation effectively, which I will get around to in a while, samadhi, there are times when it's not so good to try to practice samadhi. If the mind is very dull, then if you practice samadhi, your mind will get duller still. It's very difficult to arouse energy through samadhi. And he talks about these different enlightenment factors, and there's 3 of them. He says that when the mind is dull, it's not a good time to practice those 3 because they're calming things. But when the mind is agitated, then there's these other 3, joy and investigation and energy. These aren't so good to develop because they agitate the mind still more. But mindfulness is always useful everywhere. Mindfulness is one of the qualities, I think it's the only quality, well, apart from qualities of morality, the only kind of mental factor of which the Buddha said it's impossible to have too much. I mean, it's only positive. Mindfulness is only a good thing. There's no negative aspect to it. There's no downside to it. Proper mindfulness is just a totally, purely positive aspect of the mind. But it seems like such a ephemeral, strange thing to focus on. So mindfulness is the quality of being in the present moment, being aware of what is coming into your senses as they come into your senses. It's just being aware of what's happening as it's happening. And it seems like a very subtle thing. Samadhi, which is usually translated as concentration, but that's not such a good word. It's one-pointedness of mind. It's like the mind being collected on being able to, stability of mind, being able to stay steady and still. That's easier to see that that's useful. And also it develops, you get a lot of joy from strong samadhi, develops a lot of joy in the mind. So you feel very peaceful and calm, it feels lovely. Whereas sati is much more subtle, it's harder to develop, and it takes longer for it to really, the benefits to really to come through. But I think of it as it's like being awake. And the Buddha, as you probably know, the Buddha means awakened. The Buddha's awake. So when he said, I'm the Buddha, he said, I'm awake. And for me, that was one of the things that inspired me to become a Buddhist, actually, when I learned that Buddha meant awake, not enlightened. In English, we always use this word enlightened. The Buddha didn't say I was enlightened. That was a word which Victorian English translators used, and they liked to link the word with the Enlightenment, the European Enlightenment. So it had very positive connotations, the word enlightenment. But it's not the word the Buddha used at all. He didn't say I'm enlightened, he said I'm awake. And so Buddha is the past participle of bujjati, which means to wake up. When you wake up in the morning, that's bujjati, and when you're awake, you're Buddha, you're awake. So being mindful is very related. When we're mindful, we're awake. And if we're not mindful, we're effectively may as well be asleep, or may as well be dead. If you're not mindful, then you're not there, basically. So if you've ever had the experience of driving somewhere, and maybe when you arrive, you can't remember the journey at all. You have no memory or you've been doing something. You've been, say, making a cup of tea, and then you think, did I drink that cup of tea? You know, and the only way to find out is to go and check. And when you see your empty cup, you think, yeah, I drank it, all right. You know, I have no memory whatsoever. Well, if this has ever happened to you, it happens to me a lot. That's because you had no sati. You did something without sati. If you do it without mindfulness, you won't remember it. The original meaning of mindfulness is actually memory. And sometimes when the Buddha talks about mindfulness, he says, what is mindfulness? Here, a monk remembers what was done and said a long time ago. That's mindfulness. So he just defines it as memory. And they're very closely related. For one thing, if you're mindful, when you do something, you'll remember you did it. And if you're not, you won't. For another thing, it functions like memory in meditation. So they are very intimately connected. So there's a translation I came across once for mindfulness, recollection. And I thought that's quite a good word, a translation actually, because it has that sense in English of remembering, recollecting, and also being recollected, being present, having recollection of mind, being sort of remembering to remember, like being here, being present. It's quite a good word, a better word than mindfulness, I think, which doesn't really mean anything. It's a tag to say mindfulness means sati. So the only way to really learn about mindfulness is to practice it and develop it, and then when you become aware, you're more mindful, then you know what it really means. And it's the same about the hindrances. The same with the hindrances. You have to learn the meaning through experience, really, because mental objects, you can't It's not like cups and things. You can't think, well, that's a glass, and I know what a glass is now. Because you can't show somebody mindfulness and wave it around. Okay, and this is mindfulness. So you have to learn it yourself. So, okay, enough of the talk about why we should meditate. So to meditate, if you meditate, basically, if you put time aside from your life to meditate, then once you kind of get in the groove, and it takes a while, like learning anything else, it takes a while to get started, then it will have benefits in the rest of your life. So if you practice a bit of mindfulness, and also basically the hindrances, if there's less dullness in your mind, there's less agitation, sloth and torpor, doubt, and all these things, then your mind will function more effectively. So time you put into mindfulness will more than repay itself in the time efficiency of everything else you do. If you can do everything else more efficiently, then you've already, on a quite mundane level, you've benefited. So, just as if you're fit and healthy physically, then you can get a job of physical work done a lot quicker than if you're out of shape and flabby. So, looking after your mind, even if you're looking on a purely mundane, worldly level, it's a practical, useful thing. I mean, I can't prove this. You have to learn from experience. But what I can say is that the Buddha made it very clear. And when you meditate yourself, you soon find this. Many meditators find, even in the early stages, they find that the mind is clearer after meditation and so forth. But also just odd ideas pop into your mind on quite mundane things, quite like dull, kind of like you get these insights, but they're into really ordinary things, like we're meditating, and then during the meditation, and it can actually be an obstacle meditation. It's like it can be a distraction because you suddenly have these bright ideas when you're meditating, and even things like, oh yeah, it's like something about your daily routine, and like the way you do the washing up or something, and the way you put things afterwards. Suddenly you spontaneously think, that's a really silly way to do it. Actually, I should be doing it like this. It'd be much more practical. And you get these practical, they're very mundane, and it's not like a great reason to meditate, but it's a sign that your mind is working more clearly, and you start noticing things, basically. And this is what happens when you have mindfulness, is you notice things more. And as you practice on the meditation cushion or the seat, it helps you in your ordinary life. It goes into the ordinary life. So the other thing about the hindrances and meditation is that it's not just something you can practice when you're sitting still and quiet with your eyes closed in the lotus position or on a chair or wherever. It's something you can practice throughout your day. So bhavana, as I said, is usually translated as meditation. Bhavana means mental development. So any positive mental development is bhavana. So if you're in a difficult situation and you try not to get angry, that's bhavana. You're developing a wholesome quality. You're trying to restrain unwholesome qualities and develop good qualities. So that's bhavana. So there's two words in Pali which are usually being translated by the same word, meditation. So jayati, which means to sit formally and practice samatha, calming meditation, and people will call, in the text they say meditate. So the Buddha often said at the end of his talks, very often, he would end the talk by saying, okay, I've said what I'm loosely translating here, I've explained what I've got to explain, now go and meditate, or you'll regret it later. And the word he's saying there is jayati, so he's saying go and calm your minds. But bhavana is also translated as meditation. That's a much more general word, meaning any kind of development of wholesome qualities. So bhavana, in the more general sense, is very, very important. We need to be developing wholesome qualities in our minds, because if we don't, then the tendency is, it's like just as water flows downhill, things go to the lowest common denominator. If we don't make an effort to develop wholesome qualities, then our bad habits of mind will strengthen. So if we don't make an effort to develop good qualities, then we'll actually, throughout our lives, we'll probably be developing unwholesome qualities. There are some people, you meet some people who are very pure, very wholesome minds, and you just know that this is a person who is a very wholesome person, and as they go on in life, they will probably become more and more wholesome. It's just this is their habit of mind. Most of us aren't like that. I'm not like that. Most people aren't. We have to make an effort to develop wholesome qualities. Okay, so that's enough of a pep talk, trying to encourage why meditation is a good thing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a few more minutes about a type of meditation and what to do, and then we'll have a very short session of meditation, and at the end of that I'll ring the bell. Okay, so there are many types of meditation, but what I'm going to talk about, what I do when I meditate, is I try to calm my mind down and make it more peaceful. And this is like the foundation for a lot of things, a lot of other types of meditation. And it's kind of what people mean more or less by meditation most of the time. So the samatha, calming, which means calming, so it's samatha meditation. Now there's lots of different ways to do it, but the basic idea is to allow the mind to calm down. So the thing is, it's not to force the mind to calm down, it's to allow the mind to calm down. So if you let it, it will calm down. Just as, say, if you have a restless, like an animal or puppy or something running around, I noticed this recently with my nephew, I went to England recently. My nephew has this very excitable small dog, and I soon found that if you give it any attention at all, that it got hyperactive and excited and just went completely wild. But by ignoring it, it lost interest and calmed down. And our minds, if we put things into them all the time, which is what we're doing all day long, then they become more agitated and uncalm. If we allow them to calm down, they will calm down by themselves. But we have to be careful how we do it, because generally the default mode of our mind, if it's nothing to do, is to fall asleep. So when we try to meditate, often you just fall asleep, basically. So we need to let the mind calm down, but stay energized. So one of the factors of the mind, which the Buddha talks about a lot as being very, very useful, is energy, having energy in the mind. So we need to be alert, energetic, energized rather, but nonetheless calm. And it's a difficult balance, and there's nothing that we do in our ordinary life that actually develops this kind of state of mind. So this is what I meant about mindfulness or meditation being a completely different skill to other skills. There's nothing we do that's a bit like it. There's nothing like it at all, actually, in ordinary life. Well, perhaps there is, in that sometimes some people will naturally become quite calm and peaceful. But many people never experience anything like this. And the nearest thing I can think of is sometimes if you go on holiday and, say, sit on a beach. I used to be mystified why people wanted to go to beaches, because I found it so boring. Just sit on the beach, how boring. People love doing this in England. They kind of travel to Sri Lanka just because of the beaches. But if you have ever had an experience, you go on holiday, and at first you're restless, you're bored maybe, actually, there's nothing much to do, you're bored, you've had a busy line, you go on holiday, it's boring, there's nothing much to do, especially if you have that kind of beach tub of holiday. But as the days go by, you spend less and less time checking your phone and distracting yourself with different things. And you get to the stage where you can actually enjoy just being there, just relaxing and enjoying having a drink of water, enjoying just being alive. But usually this only happens just about when it's time to go home, basically. So just when the holiday's over, it's time to go back. And I've only really started enjoying it now. And of course, what's happened is the agitation in the mind, which is this hindrance of tinamina, not tinamina, it doesn't matter what the Pali is, vicikiccha, restlessness. That dies down gradually by itself, if you let it. So if you're not working, and if you're not spending your time reading, and if you're not spending your time listening to, say, energetic music, and putting things into your mind will calm down. You have to let it calm down. But you can't force it to calm down. So when we meditate, we just allow our minds to to calm down. So restlessness is one of the big hindrances that people have. Of the 5, it's probably the biggest, it's probably the thing which you'll notice first in your meditation. So when you meditate, you become aware, gradually you become aware of the hindrances. And the most common one is that restlessness of the mind. So what we do, so the technique basically is this, is we give our mind something to do. We don't just say, there are Zen kind of techniques of just stopping the mind. You know, they do these koans and things, and the idea is just to stop the mind dead. And although I can see the value of this, perhaps, but I've never tried it myself because, too much to go into. But basically, the idea of the samatha meditation is a different approach. It's to gradually allow the mind to calm down, and eventually the mind will become still. But the way to do it is to give your mind something to do, but which isn't agitating. If you try to give your mind nothing to do at all, if I say, okay, stop thinking, what happens is, you think, I'm still thinking. Is this stopping thinking? No, I just thought I'm not stopping thinking. The thinking carries on. You can't just stop it dead. So we give our mind something else to do, which is calming and which isn't going to agitate the mind and lead to more distraction, but which is which is enough to do that the mind has got something to focus on. But it's not very much to focus on, but it's something. So the actual object that we give our minds to focus on is not so important, and different things work better for different people. So mindfulness of breathing, which I'll explain, I'll teach about briefly. The idea is to put your mind on your breathing. It's not that there's anything magical about the breathing in itself, but it gives your mind something to do while you let it calm down. Okay? So other things is mantras. You may have heard of people talk about meditating with a mantra, repeating a word over and over. So in Thailand, they like to repeat Buddha, Buddha. So basically Buddha. They're repeating Buddha. Or in transcendental meditation, which was very popular in England decades back, they give you some word which you don't tell anyone, some special word, and you repeat that again and again. But all of these are different meditation objects. The body is another very useful one for meditation object, putting your attention into the feeling of the body. What they all have in common is that you give your mind something to do, which is in the present, so you can be aware of it in the present moment, so you can develop mindfulness. And it's also very simple, so that you can develop samadhi, this one-pointedness of mind. You can be mindful about your everyday activities when your mindfulness is very strong, but you can't have samadhi. Samadhi is one-pointedness of mind. So by choosing a simple object, we can develop samadhi and develop sati and the other wholesome qualities of mind at the same time. So the basic meditation instructions, I have to be very quick about this, I'm running shorter and shorter of time, is to get comfortable, and then you put your mind on the feeling of the breathing. So you first become aware of the breathing, and you'll just notice the feeling somewhere in the body. This is, okay, that's me breathing. So just ask yourself, am I breathing in or breathing out? And whatever it is, whatever feeling tells you, oh, I'm breathing out, whatever that feeling is, that's the feeling you have to focus on, okay? And it might be the feeling on your stomach rising and falling, or you're feeling around your nostrils or in your throat, wherever you notice the feeling, that's where you focus your attention on that feeling. And that's it, basically. That's all you do. And what will happen is that your mind will wander, because it's not a very interesting thing. So when your mind wanders, after a while, you'll notice that your mind has wandered, and it might be quite a while before you notice. So when you realize your mind has wandered, you think, okay, my mind has wandered. I'll go back to the feeling of the breathing. So you bring it back. So when you become aware, my attention has wandered, when you become aware that it's wandered, that is mindfulness. Your mindfulness has reminded you that you're supposed to be meditating, not thinking about tomorrow's meeting or something. So that's mindfulness. So if, when your mind wanders, you think, okay, I'm supposed to be meditating, and you bring it back, you're training your mind to be more mindful. And then your mind will wander again, usually within seconds. and it might be minutes before you realize. But then once you realize your mind has wandered, you bring it back. And every time you realize your mind has wandered, you bring it back. Now, one of the big distractions you'll have is thoughts. You'll start thinking various things, and depending upon your personality, you might think, this is stupid, this is a waste of time, or oh, I can't do this, or oh, this is ridiculous. My first meditation, I remember sitting there, and it's like, oh, I can't get comfortable. It's not fair. I don't have the right kind of bones for sitting cross-legged. I've been brought up on chairs all my life, and that dog won't stop barking. Oh, I got more and more frustrated as time went on. So this is a very common kind of thing. So just think of that's just another distraction. So if you find yourself thinking, oh, this is ridiculous, or am I doing it right? Just say to yourself, that's a distraction, that's not my meditation. My meditation is to watch the breath. So don't even bother trying to answer your questions or work out whether you're doing it right. If you find yourself doing anything other than paying attention to your breathing, then stop doing that and pay attention to your breathing. So whether it's you're thinking about something else, thinking about the past or the future, when you realize, stop that, come back. You can think about that later. If you start thinking about the meditation, stop that, just come back to watching the feeling of the breathing. If you start thinking about the pain in your legs and things, stop that, just come back to the breathing. So it's important to get comfortable first, and then you can put any thoughts about the body aside. So now, enough talk, so let's get comfortable, and we'll just spend 10 minutes meditating, and I'll give a kind of guided meditation, talk you through it. So some practical advice. First of all, if you're sitting in a chair, as almost everybody is, then I've been sitting like this, leaning back, using the back of my chair, but sit upright without using the chair back. If you use your chair back, you will, given long enough anyway. It's also good to have your feet planted. It may not be, if you're very short like I am, it may not be possible right now, but if you want to meditate in a chair, and it's perfectly okay to meditate in a chair, you don't have to be sitting cross-legged. If you want to meditate in a chair, sit so slightly forward, generally a bit better, so you can sit with your feet placed firmly on the ground, so you're stable and upright, and then your back is upright but comfortable. If you lean back, then you'll nod off, basically. So it's not the way we normally sit. We use the. It's also better for your posture, actually. It's better for your back to sit like this. It's actually better to sit like this all the time. But it doesn't feel so relaxed. But the thing about sitting like this, or sitting cross-legged if you can, is that it's a posture that is relaxing and yet energized. You can meditate lying down, but there's a greater tendency to fall asleep. So you can meditate leaning back like this, but there's a greater tendency to fall asleep. You can meditate standing up, but it's tiring and more draining on the body. So sitting upright is a very good balance. That's why it's the standard meditation posture, and that's why the Buddha's always pictured sitting cross-legged when he's meditating, in samadhi posture. So the thing then to do is, it's a good idea, you don't have to do it, but to close your eyes. Actually, I'd like to take my glasses off, actually, when I'm meditating. But, so sit comfortably, sit upright, and close your eyes. This will prevent distraction, basically. You can meditate with your eyes open. And it's a good idea to start a meditation session by just briefly paying attention to your body, which is a meditation technique in itself, and some people, they practice just body awareness as a meditation. And myself, I don't do that much, but I do often do it at the beginning of meditation for two reasons. One is that you want to make sure you're comfortable, so that as your meditation proceeds, you can pay less attention to the body and put your attention on your meditation object, which may be, say, for instance, the breathing. And the other thing is that the body is a very good way to get grounded. So if our minds are very agitated and all over the place, it's easier to notice the feeling in the body more clearly. It presents itself to the mind more clearly. So sit comfortably. Put your hands either on your knees if you're sitting on a chair. This is quite a good way to do it. You can put them in your lap, one hand resting on the other in the classic meditation kind of pose. But when sitting on a chair, on your knees is quite a useful way to sit. And then put your attention on the feeling in your face. And you may notice that there's tension, that your face is actually, you're slightly screwing up your face, or there's a bit of tension around the eyes or some other part of the face. So consciously relax the face. Just relax, let your face relax, and let it kind of droop. So notice the eyes, and notice notice your forehead. You may notice that your forehead is tense. Just consciously allow it to relax. So move your attention to your cheeks and allow any tension in your cheeks to relax. Then, from the face, move your attention to the neck. And notice, am I comfortable? Am I upright? And again, there may often be tension in your neck. So if your neck is tense at all, allow that to relax. Just let the muscles relax, but keeping your head upright. So move your attention down to your shoulders. And again, you may find that you're actually straining your shoulders slightly. Allow your arms to just completely droop free. Any tension in your shoulders drop. Now move your attention down your right arm. Notice your upper arm, your elbow, the lower arm, and then your hands. And again, the hands often, there can be a bit of tension in your hands. Let them relax. Let your right hand relax. From there, put your attention on your left hand. Relax any tension. Move your mind, move your attention up your arm. Notice just how it feels. Any feelings you have at all in the arm, that's what you're putting your mind on right now. Just how does my arm feel? So you feel your arm, then notice your upper arm. And when you put your mind there, you see that there is a feeling. All these different parts of my body, I can feel something there. But normally we're not aware of these feelings. So now we're putting our attention on those feelings and just noticing them. Any tension we see, move up to your shoulder, your left shoulder. Any tension, just allow it to relax. So move to the base of the neck. Let your attention move down your back. Down the spine, notice the feeling, the small of your back. And the feeling of your backside, sitting on the chair or the cushion, wherever you're sitting. The feeling of the gravity, the feeling of your weight weighing down. Just notice that feeling. And then move your attention to your right thigh, your right leg. Notice how it feels. Move your attention down to your knee, down to your calf, down your right leg to the ankles, and then the feet. Notice how the feeling of your feet, if you're sitting on a chair, the feeling of your foot resting on the ground. Move your attention across to your left foot. Back up your left leg to your knee, your upper leg, and then to your pelvis, and then back around now to the front of your body. Feel your stomach, just the feeling of your stomach. Maybe you can feel the rising and falling of your stomach as you breathe. Your abdomen, and then the chest. Move your attention up to your neck, to your throat. And back to your face. You'll probably already find that your body is more calm and relaxed than it was when you began. So now, notice your breathing. So ask yourself, am I breathing in? Am I breathing out right now? And there'll be some feeling which tells you this is an in-breath or this is an out-breath. Whatever that feeling is, just that physical sensation, you don't have to label it or even decide exactly where it is in your body. You don't need to know. But whatever that feeling is, that's your attention, should be on that. That's your meditation object for the next few minutes. For the next few minutes, you just put your mind on just feeling that feeling, just being aware of that feeling and following it as it happens in the present moment. You don't have to do anything to it. I'm not trying to make it calmer, make it faster or slower, just to be aware of the feeling. That's all we have to do. You may have thoughts or other distractions come into your mind, but whatever comes in, just go back to the actual feeling itself. Put your attention back on the feeling. Everything else can wait. The meditation is only 5-10 minutes. Everything else in the world can wait until the meditation is over. And then the world can resume. There may be other sensations in your body may call for your attention, but just put them aside till later. As long as you've sat comfortably to begin with, and there's nothing you need to pay attention to in the rest of your body. That can wait. Your body will be quite okay for 5-10 minutes. You may become aware, you may suddenly realize you've been daydreaming or your mind's wandered. When you become aware, then just bring your attention back to the breath. Don't berate yourself. Just bring your attention just back to the breath and determine to start again. If any sounds occur, call your attention away, somebody coughing, or it might be a dog barking or a car passing nearby. Just bring your mind back. Anything takes your attention away at all, any feeling in the body, any external sound, just as soon as you realize your mind has wandered, just bring it back. Now, shortly I'm going to ring the bell to end the meditation session. When I do, rather than abruptly open your eyes and abruptly snapping out of the meditation, try to retain any sense of calm, any sense of presence or awareness which has developed. Try to bring that into opening your eyes, looking around you. Bring it into your life after the meditation. So rather than just dropping all the positive qualities, you try to, that quality of being present, being aware, see if you can carry that into your actual activity afterwards. So when I ring the bell, just gently open your eyes. But in the meantime, watch your breath. Okay, that was deliberately kept short because I meant to ask, but whether there are many people here have never meditated before. Kind of briefly kind of raise your hands or nod. Many people here have never meditated? Most people? Somebody put the hand up there. Anyway, okay. So I also kept it short because I talked too long to begin with, so I've overrun. So you saw there, so I basically gave a very brief talk about meditation. The idea is simply like training, like trying to train a dog or something. If you get an animal and tie it to a stick, like a dog, and tie it to a stick in the ground, it will run around and wear itself out trying to get free. But eventually, it will give up and just lie down. And the same will happen to the mind, basically. If you keep your mind on one object, keep bringing your mind back to your breath, your various things will happen. Your mind will try to find something more interesting to do. But if you keep just bringing it back, eventually it will calm down. It's a very simple principle, really. And what happens then is that these other qualities are able to develop more strongly. The energy, one-pointedness of mind, and mindfulness, and so forth. So now, the time is already getting on. What I'd like to do is invite any questions, especially about the meditation you've just been doing, or anything you're not clear about, so that you can, so it can be more practical, basically. Because I've talked generally, but I don't know if I've been talking past you all or whatever. So, but also I realised some people may want to go, because I think you were probably told it would be 6 till 7 or something. So please do not be shy or embarrassed about just getting up and walking out. So now's the time. If you need to go, if you've got other appointments or things to do, please do leave. But I'd like to just answer questions for a while for anyone who's interested and who's got time to stay. So don't, actually they're just going to bring me a cup of tea. So please now, if you would like, and if you need to go, please go, please do. And then I'll ask for any questions. Why does it do that? Okay. Well, nobody's leaving, so okay. Can you still hear me? Am I still being amplified? Doesn't sound like I am. Am I? No. Can you hear me at the back? No. Somebody's shaking. One person's nodding, another person's shaking their head. Okay, I'm back again. See if I can drink the tea without disturbing the microphone. So you're all either too embarrassed to leave, or you've got time to stay. So has anybody got any questions, especially about the meditation, or about what we're supposed to be doing when you meditate? Anything unclear? Please do not be shy to ask questions. The Buddha said that's one of the qualities that leads to intelligence in future lives is asking questions in the present life. This is one of the factors. So if you want to be stupid in your previous lives, just sit there dully, not asking anything. So especially if there's anybody here who's never meditated before and not quite sure what they should be doing, if they're doing what they should be doing, don't be shy. Any question you have, there's no such thing as a question that's too stupid for meditation, because probably 30 people are thinking the same thing. Yes?
Failed meditation.
A failed meditation. The only kind of failed meditation is when you give up halfway through. Oh, to hell with this! I'm going to do something else, and you don't bother carrying on. I remember talking to a friend of mine years ago. She said when I became interested in Buddhism, she asked me about it. She said, "So, but meditation? Do you meditate then?" I said, "Yes." And she said, I can't meditate." And I wondered what she meant. I mean, I can't meditate. Because do you mean you can't do it, or you can't get any great success? Because if you're trying to meditate, then you're meditating. You can meditate. So if you can try, then you can do it. You know, but whether you get anywhere, and that might be a different question. But you know, if you can sit down and try to watch your breath, then you're meditating. It might be that in 30 minutes you haven't got a single second in which you're actually mindful. I remember when I was at the monastery in England, when I was a novice, or I was in white, a preceptor waiting to be ordained. I had a very busy time in those days. I had to do a lot of cooking and working, and had very little time to meditate. I had far more time when I was a layman. And I would sit there, and my mind would be so agitated. It would be ages before I could settle down at all. I remember one time, it was really depressing, where I sat down at the evening where we did a bit of chanting, and then we would sit. And it would often be a very long time before I could have brought myself together to think, right, I'm supposed to be watching my breath, And one time, the bell went, and I hadn't even started to meditate yet. And 45-minute session, and ding, I haven't even started. And there'd been no mindfulness at all. I'd just been constantly thinking about all the work in the kitchen and the arguments I'd been having with the other novices. And that was a very depressing time. Now that was probably a failed meditation, because there wasn't even an intention to start meditating. I hadn't got round to it yet. You know. But that wasn't a meditation at all. It would just be sitting down, brooding about my day. But even if you sit and try to meditate and make the sincere intention of trying to be aware of what you're doing as you're doing it, even if you pass that session without any awareness coming up, you will have been training the mind nonetheless. So imagine, you may have found what happened is that your mind wandered, and then you suddenly realize, I'm supposed to be meditating. It wasn't a very long session, so there wasn't much opportunity for this to happen. But this is what you find happens. Your mind wanders, sometimes for a long time, and then you think, oh, my mind's wandering. I'm supposed to be meditating. Meditate. Now, when that happens, sati has rearisen. That's what's happened. Mindfulness has come up. And now the condition for that was the intention at the beginning. So while you were meditating, obviously something positive was happening. And as you meditate more, you find the periods of mindlessness get shorter eventually. And the periods when your mind is on the object get longer. My personal experience is that the periods of being mindful don't get very much longer, actually, even after a long time. Even when you've been meditating for quite a few years, you can be meditating, and at first there'll be only seconds before your mind wanders, just seconds. But they're long minutes when your mind is wandering. And what happens is those minutes get shorter and shorter. So when your meditation improves, you'll find much more quickly you come back. I know I'm supposed to be meditating, you come back. And your mind goes, and I know I'm supposed to be meditating, you come back. Much more frequently. But the length of time you're actually aware and one-pointed takes a long time before that gets longer. When that does get longer, then your meditation really does pick up, actually. But that comes later. What does come is that the shorter periods. So, and that's happening because if you're doing it right, the only thing you must do, and which will guarantee your meditation will improve, is when you think, oh no, I'm supposed to be meditating, you go back to your meditation object. If when you think, oh no, I'm supposed to be meditating, I know, but I'll just finish thinking about this because it's quite important actually, it's quite interesting. And if you carry on following whatever the distraction was, then you're training your mind to carry on being distracted, and your meditation won't improve. But so you have to actually do it. You have to actually say, no. I'm supposed to be meditating. So you make the effort I can think about that later. And you drop that, you let go, and you go back to the meditation. One of the interesting quotes of the Buddha, he said, a mind that delights in relinquishment easily achieves samadhi. And that's an interesting thing. So if you delight in letting go of things, giving things up, then you, apart from any other benefits you might have, your mind achieves samadhi very easily. Because one of the crucial things we're doing in meditation is when distractions come along, we want to cling to them, but we decide, no, I'm going to let that go and go back to my meditation object instead. And that attitude of the mind, that relinquishment, that giving up, is the same as when you give things up, maybe if you're being generous and you think, I want to keep this. No, I'll let somebody else have it. That generosity of mind. They're related, very related kind of mental aspects. So if you can easily give things up, then that's actually a positive a trait which is very useful in meditation, because that's what we're doing when we go back to our meditation object we're giving up the distraction, which is actually enticing in one way or another. Even if it's irritation, actually, it's something which we're clinging to. So if you give that up, so as long as you, every time you realize, oh no, I'm supposed to be meditating, I'm not meditating, if you then actually go back to the meditation, that's all you have to do. If you keep doing that, then eventually, and it might happen quickly, it might happen slowly, that's not something you've got any control over, eventually your meditation will improve. So that period, so that's being developed by your intention to go back to your meditation object, and then the fact that you do go back. So in between, what's happening? Where's the mindfulness in between? Who can say? I mean, it's not a particularly useful question, I don't think. The point is, somehow, miraculously, it pops up out of nowhere. Suddenly you remember you're supposed to be meditating. That is there in your mind, in your unconscious, whatever you want to think of it as, all along. So all along you have been meditating, even though your mind has actually been distracted. Because the intention is there in the mind, and then it pops up. So even if you have a meditation, and let's say after 20 minutes, you suddenly think, oh, no, I'm supposed to be meditating, yeah? And you go back to your breath. And then 10 seconds later, I ring the bell. Now, suppose I'd rang the bell 20 seconds earlier. What would have happened is you'd have been 20 minutes of meditating without a single moment of being aware. And then I ring the bell and you think, oh God, completely useless. That was a completely wasted meditation. I didn't have any moments of awareness. But in fact, you were meditating just as much as if I'd rang the bell 20 seconds later. You don't see the benefits, but they are there. So if you're making a sincere effort to meditate, then you are not wasting your time. You are meditating. You're developing wholesome qualities. But you may not get the payoff straight away. And we don't tend to notice the benefits of meditation. So if you start a meditation practice and start meditating every day, it'll be a long time before you see the benefits. And again, the Buddha gave a very nice simile. He said, suppose you've got a workman has some kind of tool, like an axe or something, or say a hammer, which you use frequently. Over the years, a workman will find that hammer has been shaped, has been worn down to the shape of their hand. When he picks it up, it fits into their hand snugly and comfortably. And they've worn it into a certain shape. It may even have finger indentations of where the fingers go. But if he looks back, he can't say, well, so much was worn away yesterday, and so much was worn away the day before, and so much away. But if you look at it after a week, you don't see any difference at all. And yet, 20 years later, there it is. It's completely changed its shape. In the same way, if you look at your mind, if you try to look at how has my meditation helped me in the last 20 minutes, or the last week, or the last month, you won't see any change. But it is working, but it's working gradually. So not to be discouraged. So I don't know what your experience was. It would be nice to have any other questions of your meditating just then, but especially if that was your first time, it may not have seemed very useful. But to keep doing it, it is. But it's a very subtle thing. And it's like any skill, like playing a musical instrument. At first, you don't get very much progress at all. It doesn't appear to be any progress. But you learn through practice, not through intellectual understanding. A long-winded answer. I give very long-winded answers to questions, actually. But I can give a short answer if you want. Please, any other questions? Sorry? Sorry? Yes.
Better for a guided meditation because you have a very untrained mind.
It can be useful. I myself, I've never liked listening to guided meditations. I find them kind of distracting. But they are, at a time when I have to listen to somebody else giving a guided meditation, at times I find it very useful, and other times less so. But a lot of people find listening to a talk of a guided meditation very useful, because it's one more thing to keep reminding you. If every 10 minutes there's a voice saying, go back to your breath, then it's one more thing to help you go back to your breath. So people do find them very useful. I myself, one thing I don't like doing is giving guided meditations, actually. Teaching meditation I quite like, but the idea of, because I'm always thinking, am I talking too much? Am I talking too little? Should I be jumping in more often? I heard about once at Amravati, one of the monks was giving this guided meditation, And eventually, at some point, he was giving us instructions and kept on saying, watch the breath, go back to your breath. And somebody blurted out, I would if you'd shut up for a minute, for 5 minutes. Yeah. Because he was doing it so often that this person found it, and it suddenly blurted out. And I'm always afraid that somebody will shout at me, shut up, for God's sake. Let me watch my breath. But anyway, it can be useful. For a beginner. Or actually, many people love to listen to, not just for a beginner. And just to remind you, and also like the initial what I did at the beginning about going through the body, that's a very useful technique to calm your mind down at the beginning. So to listen to a tape of somebody saying that, even, it just helps to focus your mind, so it can be very useful. And you can get tapes of online, and it's very easy to get guided meditation talks to listen to. So yes, it's quite a useful technique.
What stage in your meditation should you require a teacher?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. In the end, you see, we have to be our own teachers, but it is very useful to have someone to teach you. But my experience, again, I can only talk from my own experience really, and a little bit of other people's, but is that at first, I wanted a teacher. I wanted someone to tell me what to do, especially after I sat and had my first awful meditation experience, which was like, I ended up far more angry, and all the hindrances were much stronger after 10 minutes of me trying to meditate than they were at the beginning, because I got frustrated. And so it can help to even at the beginning to get a bit of meditation instruction. But a lot of what you're learning at the beginning is just getting used to being in your own mind and familiarizing yourself. So a lot of the learning, my personal feeling is that initially you just have to do it and try it out. But it's not bad to have, say, a book or something as a guide to talk about these things. So things like the 5 hindrances. There's lots of advice that could be given on the 5 hindrances. And I've personally found that very, very useful teachings on meditation is just the teachings around the 5 hindrances. And there are other common pitfalls, so things that can be put in a book. So there are very good books. So when I first became a Buddhist, I went to the Buddhist Society in London. I was living in London and asked for some advice on books and things. And they recommended a book on meditation and a book for inspiration. And that meditation book was very good, by a couple of American lay meditation teachers who would be ex-monks. And there's many books like this. So initially, a book is good enough, a good book on meditation. That was a book by Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein. Jack Kornfield is a very well-known American meditation teacher. So, although he's got some dodgy views on Buddhism generally, but his meditation book I found very, very good. And so any book that goes through these things, it gives practical advice on mindfulness and things like this. So Bhante Gunaratana is a Sri Lankan monk who lives in America. He wrote a book, Mindfulness in Plain English, which is a very, very good basic meditation. There's lots of books of that ilk, of that kind of type. So for a while, it's enough really. But then, because what's happening first in meditation is you're just getting familiar with the territory, familiar with what it's like to be sitting, listening to your own chatter. And often it's a revelation to people to discover what a mess their mind is, or to even just notice that they're not in control at all. They can't do something as simple as keep their mind on a simple thing for 30 seconds. For some people that's a revelation. They're so all over the place they can't keep their mind still. And that in itself is another. If you found, as you almost certainly did, is that you weren't able to keep your mind completely one-pointed on your breath for 10 minutes, or even for 1 minute, then you can ask yourself, am I in control of my mind at all? And the answer is no, basically. So that's another reason to meditate, is that you may think that you're in charge of your mind, but you're not. Quite obviously you're not. If you try to meditate, you obviously are not in control at all. You can't do something as simple as sit still and watch your breath for 10 minutes, even if you've decided to do so. Then who's in charge? And the answer is just your habits and your past karma, all the things you've been doing, all your habits are in charge, not you. And if you'd rather be in charge of your own mind, then, well, you need to meditate and develop these qualities. But yeah, so as for the point will come where you've learned a bit about meditation and you know that I've got quite a few questions I need to ask somebody, and the answers aren't in the books. But a teacher could be a prop as well. People can like the idea of having a teacher. I go to so-and-so, so-and-so is my teacher. And it's kind of reassuring that this teacher is there. But in the end, they can only kind of point things out to you, point the way. So a lot of it is learning for yourself anyway. But so initially, I think getting a good book, which is a teacher of sorts, is a good idea. I mean, essentially, some people, that's enough. Tell them, okay, watch your breath. Every time your mind wanders, go back. And they can go away, and then 3 months later, they come back, and they're out of hand. So the Buddha had a few disciples like this, but most of us aren't like that. The obstacles come up, and we need clarification to point out where we've gone wrong. See, another long-winded answer to a simple question. Anything else? It can be, or, I mean, you don't have to ask about the meditation. You can ask about anything at all to do with Buddhism. But if you have anything else I said made you wonder or ponder or seemed, or anything you disagree with that I said, please. If you think I'm talking rubbish, don't be shy. I'm quite happy. Stimulating disagreement. The last time I gave a talk, a few months ago, there was a plethora of questions. I was afraid nobody would ask any questions. Yes. Sorry?
The overall attitude to meditation.
Yes.
There are some teachers who stress the more over very passive awareness of everything, kind of whatever is happening.
Yes.
Non-judgmental awareness kind of approach. And you then get the other extreme, where some teachers would be a very focused attention on a particular object, a very kind of,
right.
focused, which is kind of approach to a meditation object or subject.
Right.
There are two contrasting, how I would say, different approaches. What would you feel about this?
Okay, they're different emphases. I don't know if they contrast so much, but they're focusing on different things. The mindfulness is generally, I've talked a lot about mindfulness. Mindfulness isn't the only thing about meditation, by the way. It's just one of the mental factors the Buddha praised. But the mindfulness is often, when they teach it now in the West, they talk about non-judgmental awareness. They use this phrase, non-judgmental. And actually there's in a sense, I mean, that's largely it's true, but actually that's one of the areas where they've slightly misunderstood the mindfulness movement in the West. It's slightly misunderstood the Buddha's teaching on mindfulness. But then many meditation teachers do as well, so they're not so different, is that because mindfulness has an aspect of wisdom in it, which is not obvious at all at first, but it does have it there. And although the idea is, as I said, watch your breath, and I said, don't worry about if it's too fast, too slow. The important thing is to be aware, is not to try to do anything about it, and it's not to judge it, and not to, the important thing we're developing here is awareness. But what happens is, as mindfulness gets stronger, it leads to Dhammavichaya, is the Pali term, investigation of states. There's the 7 enlightenment factors, another teaching of the Buddha, and in that, the first factor there is mindfulness. And the Buddha taught that naturally mindfulness, when it becomes strong, leads to investigation of states. As your mindfulness becomes strong, you naturally start questioning, but not in a thinking kind of way. Just an aware, your wisdom faculty improves, and you naturally question what you're seeing. You investigate it, but not questioning it in a verbal way, in a non-verbal way. And it's difficult to explain without a bit of experience of it. But basically, that awareness, that wisdom aspect arises. Now, when they teach mindfulness in the West, they just talk about it being non-judgmental, don't think about it at all. And actually, that's hampering, that's suppressing the way that mindfulness naturally develops. It naturally develops an investigation of the mind. So in the West now, they teach mindfulness to soldiers and to snipers, to be mindful while they're pulling the trigger to kill people. Now, true mindfulness you would question, should I be pointing at a gun at another human being? So this is a kind of slight distortion of the sense of mindfulness. So this is going a bit off the point. But that's just talking about that non-judgmental idea. But broadly speaking, I would say it's non-judgmental awareness. The idea is to be aware, so it's kind of passive, yes. But as mindfulness gets strong, investigation, you start noticing things. As I said, when you start becoming aware of things spontaneously, that's this wisdom aspect coming up. And that comes as a consequence of mindfulness. So this will come, but you don't try at the early stage to try to think about anything or try to work anything out. The idea is just to be mindful and one-pointed. As for the idea of focusing on one thing and being very, very one-pointed, now that's samadhi. One-pointedness is samadhi, and which is what we're trying to develop in the meditation I've been talking about. But the way the samadhi comes about is, as I said, again, the Buddha gave a simile of tying an animal. Actually, he gave a simile of tying lots of different animals to a post. 5 different animals, and I can't remember exactly what the animals were, but one was a crocodile, one was a bird, one was some other hyena or something. And the thing is, they all will try to run off in different directions to their natural habitat. The bird will try to fly into the sky. One animal will run for the forest. The crocodile will make for the water. And this is like the 5 senses of the 5 physical senses. So any sounds we hear, our mind goes to the sound. If there's a smell, a strong smell, our mind goes to that. So our mind will try to run off in these different directions. And by tethering the mind to a meditation object, you don't allow it to go run off following that thing, following that different object. So it's like tying these different animals to a post. They will all try to go in different directions. If they're just tied to each other, then whichever animal is the strongest will pull all the other ones with it. And say this crocodile is stronger, they'll all end up in the water. This is what the mind does. So whichever of the 5 senses is strongest at any moment, your mind will be pulled towards that. By giving yourself a meditation object, you're tethering the mind so it can't go off in any direction and stays on the meditation object. And this is how samadhi develops. Eventually, they're stuck there, basically. Eventually, they will tire themselves out and just lie down. And this is what happens to the mind, is by keeping it on one thing, naturally, samadhi develops. And this is why I'm saying concentration is not such a good translation of samadhi, because you're thinking of forcing the mind to stay still. And this is the wrong attitude, and it doesn't work. If you try to force the mind to be calm, you get tense and all sorts of problems come up. You just allow the mind to calm down. And how does that work? Well, you use sati, mindfulness, in the aid of developing samadhi. The mindfulness allows you to keep remembering, oh yeah, my mind's wandered, I'm supposed to be staying on one thing. So the sati helps develop samadhi, because of the sati, you'll remember to keep coming back to one thing. And as time goes on, and as you spend more and more time on one object of the mind, samadhi develops as a consequence. So sati is helping develop samadhi. And there's other factors in the mind which are being developed at the same time, joy and equanimity and calm and various things, which I can't talk about now. So of the two, I say, it seems to me, my attitude towards meditation is we allow our minds to calm down. So not trying to force the mind. But nonetheless, the end result will be a very, very one-pointed mind, which can just stay absolutely still for a very, very long time. The purpose of this, by the way, is not just to feel good or to improve our chanting technique like the Brahmin. There's a mundane gains. The purpose of all of this, for the Buddha, the purpose is when the mind is still, then it's powerful. It's not distracted, it is not weakened. The hindrances weaken the mind, weaken wisdom. And when the mind is strong and powerful, then it can do amazing things. And what the amazing thing which the Buddha was interested in, it can develop wisdom and insight into what it's on. So then you take your mind from something like the breath and you put it on to aspects of the Dhamma, aspects of your own body and mind. And that strong, powerful, purified mind can then develop insight into the nature of our minds, into the nature of mind itself. And it can look at itself. And you develop insight and wisdom which will liberate you from suffering. But I mean, I haven't even talked about that. But that's the whole purpose of the meditation. For the Buddha, in Hinduism, they talk about samadhi as an ultimate thing. And the Buddha's early teachers, before he found his own path, he went to teachers who taught him samadhi techniques and developed very, very refined states of mind. But the Buddha reflected, that's all very well, but this just leads to nice, peaceful, refined states of mind. That's not the end of suffering. It's just temporary. So that's why he carried on beyond that. So what I'm talking about is very nice in itself, but actually it's not the ultimate answer to life, the universe, and everything. It's just how to get a nice, calm mind. That has to be used to develop wisdom and insight, which I haven't even talked about yet. But so that's another reason for developing meditation, actually, is that you can get enlightened if you do it. I hope that answered your question. I don't know if it did. But so, of the two, I would shy away from talking about really straining to keep your mind on one thing. That is what we're aiming for, but not by forcing it. But we achieve it through sati and open awareness.